Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another video. Another paid request, this time for my good friend John the Zero Cool. Thank you so much for that, man. And for those interested in requesting topic, reaction, commentary, random, whatever it may be, re-review, whatever, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both things are down below in the info box. Now, he wanted me to talk about, there's a YouTube channel that is run by this guy named Brad Server, but he is Curly's grandson, so he calls himself Curly G. And he does like skits with buddies, a la the Three Stooges. There's one where he visited his grandfather's grave as well as Shemp's grave, and they started a podcast, a video podcast called the Three Stooges Official Podcast, and John wanted me to look at episode 1, where Curly G and this guy, Andy Pagana, who I guess is a director, and he's also a big fan, and they're really good friends. They're on one side, and the other side is the interviewee, which in this case, the guy being interviewed is Larry's great-grandson, Kurt, who at one point was a crew member of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And then they have this moderator named Phil on another video in the middle. I thought that was kind of weird because I'm thinking, well, you have these two guys here. You know, Curly G, Curly's grandson, and this guy, Andy. Why don't they just interview this guy? Like, why do you need this guy in the middle in another video who's a moderator? I don't understand that, but hey, it is what it is. Now, before I get into it, and again, you wanted me to talk about that episode, the first of this podcast, I just wanted to mention again, for those who don't know, I'm a huge Three Stooges fan. I grew up with them. I watched a lot of their stuff back in the day on VHS tapes. My aunt had a lot taped on multiple VHS tapes. I would watch them over and over again, love them, enjoy them, laughed. And I do have them. It's crazy that they have not done a Blu-ray set of the Three Stooges. That's just strange to me. Well, a lot of the crap that gets a Blu-ray, you would think, you know, these are classics and they don't get a Blu-ray. But I do have the DVD, and just to show them, and just also to show just how great condition these sets are in. I'm going to try to get this fixed up a bit. 1 second. Get that in there. There we go. But we have 1934 to 1936. Mo, Larry, and Curly there. Then we have Volume 2, 1937 to 1939, which is another 24 shorts. 1940 to 1942. (1943 to 1945). And then we're into Sally, the final days of Curly, because he had a stroke filming one of the shorts, Half-Wits Holiday, and had to retire. And then you could tell that he was not quite there in the last days of these shorts. And so they got the other brother, Shemp, who is also a great talent. So 1946 to 1948. And then you had the Shemp years, like 1949 to 1951. And 1952 to 1954. Then Sally Shemp had passed away, and they had to at times make some shorts, and they didn't have Shemp, so they would use Fate Shemps, which is what Sam Raimi and them would use for kind of extras and other people in the Evil Dead films. They had the term Fate Shemps. And you then introduced to Joe Besser, who I never liked. Was not a fan of. Really, this is here just for the bits of Shemp, those shorts, and then for completion's sake. 1955, 1959, that was kind of the end of that era of the Stooges. And then, years later, because of TV, they found a bit of a resurgence. So you had a bunch of movies, like the ones in this set, with Curly Joe, as he was called. Have Rocky Will Travel, The Outlaws Is Coming, which actually has Adam West from Batman in it. Rocky and the Rockies, that's actually an older film with Curly. Three Stooges go around in the world in a daze. Three Stooges meet Hercules. Time Out for Rhythm, that's another film where you have actual... So there's two with the old Curly in it, and the other four is with Curly Joe. And then you have this film, The Three Stooges in Orbit. And there's a lot of cartoons and things of that nature. And I even have... It's part of a big set, but these are the DVDs. And I recommend, John, if... I think it's on YouTube, actually, now. They upload this. Hey Mo, Hey Dad. If you type in Hey Mo, Hey Dad, it's about a 10-part... Yeah, about 9 or 10-part documentary showing much detail, home family movies of every year of these guys' is like, not every year, but great progression of their lives. And Mo's son had a big hand in making it. Celebrating 100 years. So yeah, volume 1. Again, this stuff is on YouTube. Just type in Hey Mo, Hey Dad. Take a personal journey with Paul Howard, Mo's son, back in time to the 1890s when the sons of a strong-willed Jewish mother learned about love, laughter, and shtick on the streets of Brooklyn. Episode 2, the Howard brothers, Mo and Shemp and pal Larry, morph to the Three Stooges, step up from vaudeville, set to bananas to acclaim and Columbia Pictures' brightest stars. Shemp quietly exits the trios as little brother Curly steps in with gusto and brilliance. Episode 3, going to the 1930s. Each part is about an hour. Idea is about 9 or 10 parts. So it's a cool set that you can maybe find on Amazon. Hey Mo, Hey Dad. But also, again, as far as I know, these are up on YouTube if people want to see them. So definitely for John, check that out. I know I'm 8 minutes in and I haven't gone to the task at hand, but I wanted to give a little bit of setup. I'm a huge fan. I even remember the Curly Shuffle, a song that was utilized in the 80s. Do the Curly Shuffle, do, do. Now, so episode 1, like I said, they interview Larry's great-grandson, Kurt. And overall, it was interesting enough. Episode 1 of a podcast. Some stuff I might ant on. I mean, they go into, at first, Andy and Curly G about them doing these live shows and skits, and they wanted to find a Larry, and they thought, well, actually Curly G could do a pretty good Larry. I don't know, I mean, that didn't really interest me too much because, hey, good on you, Curly's your grandfather, you want to continue the legacy, I understand. But for me, it's like there's only the Three Stooges, and there always will be the Three Stooges, and imitation is still imitation. And I understand imitation is a form of flattery, and to make the legacy live on, but it still always don't come off as an imitation. no matter what. So I'm not really big in this. I'm like, you know what? Cool for you. I just rather just go watch the real deal and go back to rewatch them. I don't think the Three Stooges can ever be imitated again. I think they just had the right chemistry, the right what it was just them. It's like I don't want to see someone pretend to be Ernest P. Worrell. I just rather just watch actual Jim Varney, Ernest P. Worrell, and the older stuff. I don't want to see someone pretending to be him. You know, I don't want to see someone pretending to be Jim Terry. I just go watch actual Jim Terry. But when they got into the interview, there's some interesting stuff. Like the guy was 1 year old when his great grandfather passed away, so but he was handing down stories from his family throughout the years. Like Larry was the type of guy that would give the neighborhood kids candy because he had enough money for it. There was a bit where during Thanksgiving, apparently Larry and his wife were fighting over a turkey. It's done yet? No, it's not done. So Larry's pulling it out, but she's putting it in. It's not done yet. It's done. It flies off, slides across the floor through these kitchen doors, and Larry comes down and goes, "Well, dinner's ready." He tells a fun story that apparently that his father told him. His uncle was, I think, his father told him that his father was kind of just watching TV one day, and Larry was going to wallpaper an area and called his buddy Mo, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta watch this." And so lo and behold, Mo and Larry, they're trying to wallpaper. Within 5 minutes, they're yelling at each other. They're hitting each other with these paintbrushes. They're goofing off like it was a Three Stooges episode, and then afterward, they're laughing about it. I thought that was kind of a nice, sweet story about that. This guy, Kurt, again, he does about working for the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and how there's like a bit where, hey, guess who is the great-grandson? They guessed Ron, and people would come and go, "You're not really the great-grandson of Larry." "Yeah, I am," and would show a picture of him as a baby, and they're like, "Well, that'd be like a weird thing to make up, like, I could make up I'm his grandson. I could make up something this and that." And he owned the company C3, which I guess owned a lot of the rights to the Three Stooges. Not the shorts and the movies, but just a lot of the other types of merchandising. The other stories I do remember liking is, number one, the convention. He went to some of the conventions, which I didn't realize there were Three Stooges conventions back in the 80s, but I guess there were. I would love to find video of 80s. I don't know if there are any video of 80s Three Stooges conventions. That'd be interesting to find. But apparently Michael Jackson was in one of them, and he was a big fan. He had this kind of beekeeper veil to hide who he was, and he unveiled it, and then started a pie fight. And apparently he wanted to do a movie in the 80s, but he wanted to play Curly. So, of course, that wasn't going to happen, so that didn't come out to be. But, yeah, apparently he was a big fan of the Three Stooges. I thought I would say that was my favorite story, the Michael Jackson one. Which, honestly, I'm surprised they even brought up Michael Jackson, considering so many people still feel that he did those things to those kids. I don't. I think there's enough evidence that he didn't do it. That's just my take on it. I don't want to get into that because that's a whole other deal. But I'm just surprised they brought his name up. I wonder if they ever got any flack or any shit for that. Also, the Larry's great-grandson brought up that his grandpa, I guess, was the main bad guy in The Outlaws Is Coming, this movie here. I'm like, oh, I remember that guy. I remember that character. I didn't know it was this guy's grandpa. About how intense he was. You know, all the stories about it. And also, apparently, that guy got buried in a pet cemetery. because him and his wife love their pets so much, and they're like, when we die, we want to be buried with our pets. So they are buried in a pet cemetery. The other info I thought was interesting was there was a book. There's a few books, not as much on the other Stooges, but there's a few on Larry, and one was called Stroke of Luck. And apparently it was very rough, and Larry died before it was finished, so the guy, the author, he took a lot of liberties in finishing and putting holes, filling up holes through the narrative, but that there's a lot of errors in that book, and apparently, based on Larry's great-grandson, that's the book not to read. Now, granted, and this is kind of one of the issues I had with it, it was fun enough to hear some of those stories, and that was the best part of it. Like this, the beginning, talk about the skit talk, not really in on it. Like I said, I would just rather rewatch the real thing than people pretending to be the Three Stooges. That's just my take on it. But the info about learning a bit about Larry's life and the stories handed down to the great-grandson, that was fun enough. Like I said, my favorite bit is the convention talk in the 80s. I would love to hear more talk of that, of 80s Three Stooges conventions. I would say, I don't know if they would ever see this, but do an episode on that. Do an episode on the 80s Three Stooges convention circuit and how they came to be, how that was, who was involved with it, if there's any footage of it. That would be great to showcase. But a lot of times with this stuff is, obviously for a lot of these guys, their grandfather, their great-grandfather's legacy holds a lot of monetary value. And I understand that. I get it. If my grandpa was, I don't know, or great-grandpa was John Wayne, I want to get into, try to get some money out of it, and merchandising, and so on and so forth. I can understand that. But number one, that could go into why you don't want anything of infraction of, because there's a bit where it's like, there's this book that said he was a ladies' man, and no, he wasn't a ladies' man, he loved his wife. And perhaps he did, but also it's like, well, perhaps you're saying it because you don't want any bad marks on it that could maybe hurt your merchandise money. Because the whole third part of this podcast was talking about the merchandise and selling himself, selling his company. It felt like an advertisement by the end, and that's where it kind of lost me. And I get it. Any podcast, their stuff is like, hey, either selling some advertising, unless it's very funny bits of like Jim Cornette, when he sells advertising, those could be actually rather entertaining with the way he does it. But for the most part, people don't, even though they're meant to advertise and get people enticed, it kind of does the opposite, and they kind of lose focus, they stop listening. Kind of a weird like catch-22 thing, I know, but it's just something I wasn't really interested in. Now maybe he wanted to show stuff and I would never buy it, but just to see what, oh wow, that exists? Oh cool, that exists? Like if you want to do an episode of like the weirdest or the craziest Three Stooges merchandise and a show and tell, I think that'd be cool on this visual, podcast. That'd be cool to see. Show and tell type of thing. That'd be nice. But I did. I mean, it's the guy wanting to sell his business. He's part of the C3 company that sells merchandise. And okay, good luck with that. I wasn't really that interested in listening to that part. Like I said, the whole moderator where it's like you got two guys that could just interview the guy. Why do we need this third guy on video format in the middle? It just felt too many cooks in the kitchen. Because one's trying to talk, but then he's talking, and he's trying to talk. So I think there's some little wrinkles that be worked out. But with that said, like, they seem like nice people. They seem like nice folks. it was like I said, it was nice to hear a little bit of info. Like I said, would love to have heard more about that '80s convention talk. Like I said, it was nice to hear that Michael Jackson story. Nice to hear a little bit about Larry, which I mean I like all. Other than Joe Besser, I like all the other Stooges. And overall, it's still fun to watch. I guess other podcasts they're doing, like they'll do podcasts on talk about certain shorts, certain episodes. So if you're a Three Stooges fan, it's at least worth a watch, and definitely of interest. I wish them luck in their podcast growth, and curious to see who they get next for interviews and things of that nature. And it's nice to see these characters live on at least a little bit, because that's the thing with these older material and media, with the way the world is today, where people for the most part seem to be only interested in the now and the current, and if it's nostalgia, maybe they go the furthest back they go is '80s nostalgia, at least nowadays. A lot of these older stuff could disappear, and because again, who nowadays is going to talk about Three Stooges or Red Skelton or Jerry Lewis or things of that nature? Not a whole lot. Do you think a 20-year-old is going to know about this stuff? No, how would they know? Just who's going to introduce them to it? Who's going to talk to them about it? Who's going to mention it to them? Would they even be interested? Are they so far off the beaten path in terms of the culture and the way things are nowadays? Would it be kind of alien to them? I don't know. But I guess that's up to the personality, that's up to the consumer, that's up to the individual. But I do want these guys to live on. And if the Three Stooges podcast and stuff like this helps do that, to me that's a plus. So I wish these guys luck, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.